Hey everyone, welcome to this brand new episode of Phenoms. You would absolutely need to stay until the end because this is going to be an interesting one. Make sure you do. Today we have Matt Wampler, and he is from ClearCOGS. They recently raised a $3.8 million seed round. We're going to dissect that, dive into that. That's quite an amazing feat. Matt, how do you feel about that raise?
Mark, first off, pleasure to be here. Thanks for
Same.
having me.
My
Look, I
pleasure.
mean, it feels like a weight off my shoulders. I'm privileged and honored to have gotten to close the round, and frankly, I'm excited to get back to work.
Yeah. And what happened? Did the work stop before the round or what?
You know what? It's one of those there's something weird about being a venture-backed startup where if you don't raise the round, at least at the stage we're at, there is no company, right? You have to fire everybody and, refigure out how to do it as a bootstrap company. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, time pauses for a moment of time where you can't really plan what the future looks like until you get this round secured. So, yeah, it's the moment it closed, it's like, all right, well, I now know we have a future for the next 2 years to go do the things we wanna do.
I love it. Absolutely. And before we dive into that, I really want you to break down in, layman terms. Like, what do you guys do for those that don't know?
Yeah, so look, I'm a longtime restaurant owner operator. I was Jimmy John's franchisee for about a decade, and, what we do is support restaurants. Fundamentally, we believe that if a restaurant knows its future, it can make far better, more systemized decisions each day and ultimately make more money. And most of the time, those decisions are things like, what do I need to prep today? What should I order for the week? What's my staff budget look like? ClearCOGS is a predictive analytics vendor. We provide basically prescriptive analytics to restaurants, helping them prep, order, and staff the right amounts each day.
That's amazing because at the end of the day, you're basically eliminating food waste for huge chains out there, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're eliminating inefficiencies. So food waste is a result of not matching your supply and your demand, right? Do I have enough food ready
Yeah.
for the customers that are ultimately going to show up? So for a lot of customers, it's food waste. They are so scared of not being able to serve their customers. They produce far too much food, and ultimately it gets donated or thrown away. The inverse is also correct. I mean, how often have you walked into a restaurant and wanted to order the brisket and, they're out? That's the same issue. They just mismatched on the other way. So, again, it's just eliminating those inefficiencies.
And I know that, when I was really young, I worked at a Domino's Pizza, and Domino's is extremely advanced, right? Like they got all of these dashboards. Even the delivery guys can see that. And there's a thing, like most small restaurants are not equipped with that type of, tooling, right? Like I guess you're basically boosting this base of restaurants that are not technologically, integrated with your type of solution to grow and scale, right?
Yeah, I mean, McDonald's is best in the business. I think they
Yeah.
employ like half the data scientists in the industry. It's kind of crazy. I was talking to one of their kind of C-suite executives that had moved over to Domino's maybe 10, 15 years ago, right when they did that digital kind of overhaul. And, he was just shocked when he got there that no, none of this was in place. I think
That's
you'd be
crazy.
really surprised when you dig into the restaurant industry to realize just how much of it is run on gut feel and spreadsheets.
Yeah, and the spreadsheets, they just look at it. Okay, last month, we had this. Maybe last year we got that, but there's no advanced calculations for each item or itemization or whatever. Just it's crazy how kind of dinosaurish it feels like. Probably you've seen the back end of these stores and you spotted this huge mistake and then problem in the industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy John's was the franchise system I was part of.
Uh
It's a
huh.
multi-billion-dollar company with, 2, 3,000 locations, and
That's a
we
lot.
ran the entire thing off of Excel spreadsheets and guessing. It was a 4-week moving average of sales. we would add 20%. Why 20%? I don't know. It was some arbitrary number somebody'd come up with
Seriously.
so that we didn't run out of product. And then we would guess, kind of based on historical averages, what that meant in terms of how much meat to slice and how much bread to bake.
And since then, did you integrate already so ClearCOGS into this chain or not yet?
Yeah, we work with a number of Jimmy John's
Oh
franchisees. And I
wow.
mean, it was a lot of times it's about decisions, right? So every day you're running your same operation, and there are these little decision points. For us, it was, bread. We're baking bread fresh throughout the day. So, like 2 hours prior to close, you're sitting there as an assistant manager saying, okay, do I have enough bread? Or, can I shut the ovens off and start cleaning them? Or do I need to bake another cycle of bread? And I mean, Mark, you were at Domino's. I'm sure you can figure out what ends up happening. The
Of
manager's
course.
like, well, I certainly am not gonna run out because that's a nightmare. So, like, let's just bake that extra cycle, and, that's a $10 mistake. Is
Yeah.
that gonna make or break the business? No. But, when you start adding it up and it's a $10 decision here and a $20 decision there, and you bleed off $100, that's, 36 grand a year that you're losing out on, and that is oftentimes the difference between being able to make your bank payment or not.
It's intense. A lot of people don't know how thin margins can be with small, family-run restaurants. I'm not talking about like the Domino's out there, but a lot of franchisees they already had tons of stuff to pay, even though they're behind huge banners.
Yeah, I mean, these are ultimately small businesses, and, when you look at the franchise system, their job is to give you a set of systems and procedures to run your restaurant, very
Yeah.
operationally focused. Here's where you buy your food, this is what you should do every morning when you come in, but they don't live on the bottom line. Franchises take a cut of revenues. They're like the tax man. You're paying them 7, 10 cents on the dollar for every revenue you generate. So you can imagine they tend to support much more on the top line. They want to make sure you're selling every product you possibly can. They're not quite as incentivized to manage the bottom line. They ultimately leave that to the franchisees most of the time.
And do you feel like kind of white labeling ClearCOGS to, maybe like the franchisee operators would make sense like down the line in the future so that it's kind of deployed by force to all of their, sub franchisees? Yeah.
Well, first off, I don't think we ever have to deploy it by force. I mean, for franchisees who have, oftentimes been left to their own demise to manage the bottom line and make these decisions,
Yeah.
this is kind of a saving grace. So it's never something we need to force in there. But
Hmm.
yeah, we
Hmm.
do work with franchisors and have this as a system that, supports all of their franchisees. In large part, that's kind of the business model.
Yeah.
We're certainly not handing over an AI forecasting system to some franchisees and saying, "Hey, here's, a new tool, go figure out how to use it," because, that's not what their skill set is.
No, I'm actually asking because, in Domino's Pizza, you can't open up a Domino's franchise without the tools that they provide you. Like, you have to have their metric system, and it's integrated with like their warehousing in different cities and all that. So, that's why I guess I was curious, like, if they would like force it for scaling and growth eventually.
Yeah, I think most of the time they do, and they
Hmm.
do, honestly, because they get a little bit of a price break there. I don't wanna go sell every individual franchisee,
Oh,
but,
yeah.
like, it's not cheap to build out a true AI operations management platform, which is what we do, and so, like, for us to go in and build that out, there's an upfront cost, and the more people that's shared across,
Hmm.
we can make it, more affordable for franchisees, so most of the time, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's really important because, a lot of startup ideas, for the founders listening in, they're in completely different niches maybe, and they don't have this force of numbers that they can negotiate with when they hit like, for example, huge brands with tons of locations. if they, for example, do manufacturing or whatever. That's a little bit of a different ballgame. But in your case, in your niche, do you feel like it has been a huge advantage for you? Tapping into just one brand and they got like 60,000 locations and bam.
No, it hasn't. So, like, the hardest thing to do in any startup, no matter what everyone tells you, is sales. Sales and distribution are the hardest thing to do. And look, doing enterprise contracts right out of the gate, that's difficult. It's long sales cycles, selling a new product, that's tough. So, like, it is really helpful long term for us to be able to service these companies. But we certainly started out with working with anybody with a pulse just to validate that we can do what we say we do and, do those, case studies.
Yeah, and I guess you had plenty of resistance so far. Like, you're coming into, a very basic, like, let's say, family-run restaurant on the corner, and you're like, "Hey guys, you should try this out." Like, did you feel initial resistance when you were trying to sell?
Yeah, we did, and, it was funny. It was harder to sell to those individual independent restaurants, and it wasn't necessarily the need, there was more of a need there, but, they're dealing with putting out the fires in the kitchen and just keeping the place staffed. Running a restaurant is so difficult that very rarely do you get the time and energy to pull your head out of the weeds and focus on the big picture and what are we going to do for our tech stack. So ultimately it was really when we got into the 5, 10 unit groups that were growing, that were you know built for growth and looking to the future, that had somebody in a corporate office that's thinking about this, where we really kind of found that product market fit.
Nice. And what has been like the adoption rate for you when you're going, for example, for the family-run business, like as opposed to the huge multi-corporate conglomerates out there?
I'm sorry, I missed the question there. What is the difference?
I guess what was the biggest challenge compared to compared to the big ones? Yeah.
Yeah, so we just launched a marketplace offering on Toast. It's one of the bigger
Mhm.
POS systems for independent restaurants,
Oh, nice.
really to solve that individual problem. And that is not every restaurant can go have their own bespoke, AI operations management system. So we've taken all the learnings that we have had with our large enterprise customers and we've productized them into a single click deploy solution for that independent restaurant. Because what
Nice.
you really find out is that the bottleneck there to servicing that customer was the onboarding and implementation and then the maintenance of the system. They just don't have the time. It needs to be automated. Doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles, but it just needs to be easy. What's the easy button?
And let's say you're integrating this in a mom and pop shop. Like, what is like the biggest, thing that they tell you that no, we absolutely don't want to use this? And do you have any like ways to overcome that, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to trust,
Right.
right? I've done this for 30 years. I know my business.
That's a
How,
lot.
how are you going to know it better than me? And the overcoming it's gotten easier over time, especially with AI proliferating everywhere. I mean, we've been doing machine learning from day one. So like we used to not talk about it. Now we kind of can because, they look around, they say, you know, my car's driving itself. We've got rockets that are, landing
Right.
autonomously on landing pads due to AI. So when you show up and say, hey, look, look at what AI is doing across the industry, right? Like there's so much that it can do. It's this powerful tool. We're not trying to reinvent your operations. All we're trying to do is take the learned intelligence that you have about your, brand and your prep and your ordering and we're just going to digitize it. It's going to be, artificial intelligence of your learned intelligence. And now it's just systemized. It's your best manager being repeated day in and day out. And somehow that gives people this comfort of it's not going to be a different person making these decisions. It's me making the decisions, but the digitized version of me.
Hmm. And a lot of founders now are trying to kind of capitalize on this whole huge AI wave and the promised land behind it. They're also selling a lot of different platforms to restaurants. Like for example, AI auto response systems, like for chat or even via phone calls or whatever. So usually, from what I've heard, startup founders first go and try to sell, and then eventually they just run out of time because they're like stuck in operation. So, what's like your secret to try to delegate yourself? Because the founder is the better, the best salesman out there, right? So, how do you delegate that skill?
And you know what? It's something we all struggle with. It's something I still struggle with. It's something restaurants struggle with. How do I digitize myself and systemize myself? I don't have a, silver bullet on this one. I do think that the thing that I probably bring to conversations with customers more than a traditional sales rep would is empathy, right? This is a real person who has a job and a million things to do that's giving you 30 minutes of their day, right? So that you can hopefully help them with a problem. You know, empathizing with them, trying to understand why they're here, what they're trying to achieve, and how we can help them. I think that is, just the basis for a great relationship. And sales is often about relationships. So, how do we empathize more with the customer?
Absolutely, I agree 1,000,000% actually. And before we even go further, I'm curious to ask you, like, can we go back in time? Can you bring us back to when you were 10 years old? How was your life like as you were a kid, and just bring us there.
I grew up in Champaign, Illinois, to
Nice.
a small town lawyer, and my mom was a stewardess and a flight attendant. I don't know what we're calling them today. Who retired when I was born. We lived on a single income that wasn't that great for a long, long time, and part of it was like my dad was the world's thriftiest man. Like, there was this one wonderful, moment. I came home from, like, my first sleepover. I said, "Hey, Dad, you'll never guess what I found out. You can get pepperoni on pizzas." And my dad's just like, "Oh, no.
Oh
The
my god.
cat's out of the bag."
Uh-oh.
We don't pay for the upgrade, the toppings. Like, you get just as much value out of the pizza without the toppings, without the 20% increase in price. Like, that was the world I grew up in, optimizing for value. And so, like, it's no wonder that, you grow up and it's like, how do we create the most efficient system where we create the most value for customers?
That's crazy, man. And can you also share with us like your first initial jobs, like before you even had the entrepreneurial fiber? What did you do?
Yeah, my dad let me go get a work permit at 15,
Oh
called
wow.
up a property management company that he knew and said, like, "I got a kid for you to work this summer." And so it was basically hauling drywall up and down flights of stairs and doing demo. It was the
Oof.
most miserable job ever.
Yeah, that's intense. When you're 15, getting so physical already. I remember my first job. I was just mowing lawns at like 14. I think it was simple, not like demolishing premises.
Yeah, I think my first unofficial job was mowing lawns. My dad got
Also,
me a push lawnmower. I don't know if any of you
same.
remember the push lawnmower. Oh, it's like you're going along and then you hit a stick and just, it jerk.
It jabs.
I
It
I
jabs.
I hated that push lawnmower with such a passion.
I think they're actually doing that on purpose so that we get this first experience, the first taste of like a demanding job where you need to use your force, as a kid.
I think we call that hazing.
Jesus, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And yeah, and when did you actually start feeling that okay, I definitely am a leader. I want to build something for someone else? Like, what was your first project, or did you have multiple projects like that failed or even succeeded before? How did that work?
Well, first off, I did not sit there and think I'm a future leader and how do I create a business empire? Like that was not the thought process at all. I was a semi-delinquent college kid that managed to weasel my way into a investment banking internship. And, I got done with the internship and the guy offered me a job. And I remember sitting there thinking like, okay, I am an ADHD dyslexic kid. The
Gee.
last thing I want to go do is sit in a cubicle.
Mm.
And, I found this opportunity to buy a failing Jimmy John's. And I'm like, you know what? That I think I could do and do well. And so, you run into that situation where nobody else wanted to buy this Jimmy John's. They were all smarter than I was. They knew what they were looking at. I was the naive kid. And so, I jumped into it.
How old were you when you got the opportunity to do that?
I was like 2021.
Oh my god. How do you
Yeah.
save up that early to get yourself a premise?
Yeah, I honestly I fell into it. Jimmy John's is headquartered in Champaign, Illinois, where I
Mm.
was born, and so, like, I stumbled across this opportunity and, the store was gonna close if no one bought it, so Jimmy John's was kind enough to let me buy it for pennies on the dollar,
No.
and, it was, you know, it's actually somewhat similar to this whole venture capital predicament where, like, if you don't make it work, the repercussions are bankruptcy. So it's like you sign personally for everything. You make this work or you
Mm.
file for bankruptcy. When those are the stakes, like you find a way to make it work. I think, same goes with today with startups. It's, hey, you've raised this round of capital. There is no more capital if you don't make it work with this. So you better find a
Right.
way to make it work.
Was this a little bit the situation that you fell into when you got your first premise there?
Yeah, I mean, that was the premise. It was,
Mm.
you make this work or you're going bankrupt.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And how did that turn out? Like, tell us a little bit what happened after you got it.
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen The Bear. There's this FX show. Very similar to that story. Um, I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. I walked in on the first day, and I mean, you open the door, and all you could smell was the grease trap. If you've ever been into a restaurant that you think smells kind of off,
Yeah.
that's probably the grease trap.
Oh. Oh, and
And
it was never changed, right?
yeah, I mean, it was
Oh god.
clogged, it was, like, overflowing, and, on top of that, you've got the air conditioning out, it's the middle of summer, it's 110 degrees in the kitchen, like, it was so hot, they literally had ice buckets on top of the cold table compressors to keep them from overheating. I think there was, like, a staff of 3. I mean, basically, the guy had sold it, and for the last 3 months had put no money into it whatsoever because, he'd run it into the ground, and it's like, "Alright." This is as bad as it gets, go figure it out.
I love that. I love, your sense of adventure, and you were already kind of plunging into the darkness, into the void, just trying things out. Like, a lot of people don't even have the mental energy to do that. Like, what
Oh,
was your driving force? Yeah.
yeah, need. It turns out need is your driving force. I certainly wasn't thinking I'd walk into a total, disarray store. I'm monitoring my language because there's some colorful words I'd like to use. But yeah, I wasn't expecting to walk into this. So, you know, you had to figure it out. It wasn't like it was something I wanted to. It was just need, necessity.
And you mentioned previously that you had this internship at investment banking. Was it kind of related, or did you have to like drop it off and then go into some completely different industry? Like, how did that transition happen?
Well, there was a gap. So, that's the junior year and, between your junior and senior year. And so then I had my whole senior year to kind of get prepared for this. So I got a part-time job at a Jimmy John's nearby and, was delivering sandwiches, certainly not running shifts, but trying to get a feel for it. You know, you go to a 3-week corporate training, you get a 4-week apprenticeship. So you have some idea what you're doing when you walk in. But, I give Jimmy John's all the credit. I should not have succeeded.
Wow.
The only reason I succeeded was because they provided me a playbook. This is what you're supposed to do every day. And I walked in and day after day just executed and followed the playbook day in and day out. And slowly but surely, the operation started to turn around.
Do you feel like, because you literally said like something extremely important, that 90% of founders would never dare to say to themselves like, I should not have succeeded. Like that's intense. Do you feel like the playbook was the only savior, or was it actually your sense of, responsibility and drive to succeed?
Was more the sense of I didn't wanna fail. Also, I didn't wanna declare bankruptcy, more so than
Mm.
succeeding. And yeah, that played a huge part in it. I lost all of my staff. I mean, there were only 3 to start with, but my
Oh, that's not
one
a lot, yeah. But it's
yeah,
good to have at least a few, yeah.
the guy who had been kind of the manager of the location prior stayed on as
Mm.
my assistant manager. He saw that I was in a pinch and in over my head and used the situation to basically say, "Hey, double my salary or I'm gonna walk."
No. Are you
And I
serious?
remember yeah, and I remember having that moment and just saying like, "Look, I'm not gonna be extorted, and those aren't the people I want running the restaurant."
Wow.
And so, he walked, and that left me with running 10 of the 14 management shifts. So, 7 days, 2 shifts a day. Um, we were at campus location, so the first guy got in at 6 a.m and the PM manager got out at 4 to 5 a.m. So, it's operating 22 to 23 hours a day. So you kind of do the math and you realize, okay, if I'm running 10 shifts, I'm really running 120 hours a week and I'm doing 24-hour shifts, basically 3 days a week. And, that was the situation I was in. So I worked 120 hours a week. I lost 30 pounds in the first 30 days. I slept
Seriously.
on the back. Yeah, I slept on the back of the store
Oh.
floor. You kind of find that if you roll up a couple aprons, you can use them as a pillow. And, you know, you
Do you
certainly,
remember,
yeah, I had to work my way through it.
and Matt, do you remember the thoughts that were going through your head when you were, like, sleeping on the floor there, like, back in the days?
I had this wonderful moment. It's like 9 months, maybe a year after I, you know, bought the location where I was cleaning out the safe, and I found this letter. So if you rewind, I've been doing this for like 12, 16 weeks. I'm emaciated. I haven't slept. It's just a nightmare. And there was some error in the franchise agreement that they had for all the people that had signed that generation. Basically, it said like, if you sign this, you can give up your franchise. Now, I don't think that would have cleared my bank loans, but like, I guess I sort of remember. It's like 4 a.m. I've been working for 24 hours straight. I signed the thing and said, I'll wait in the morning and, do something with it. And I put it in the top part of the safe, fell asleep at my desk. Totally forgot about it in the morning and found it 9 months later and realized like I was that close to just tapping out and giving up. And, by the time I had found that, it was a year later, and we'd taken the store from doing $400,000 in revenue a year and losing, $150,000 a year to doing like $1.2 million a year. And like we were profitable, we were running well, and it was like, man, it's just that close.
And did that whole story kinda motivated you to, you know, uh, see bigger? Like, literally because, you probably had so much more potential than just being the owner of one store, and you probably felt that. Was there, like, an event and a pivot in your life that happened where you had this flash like, "Okay, I'm gonna go and dream bigger and do wilder things"?
Yeah. Well, let's just put things in context. I'm like 23 now. I've walked into my first business venture. I've tripled sales. I'm the golden boy, highest comp in the chain. I think that I am God's creation. Like I am the greatest operator ever to have lived. So I, of course, think I'm gonna open up as many restaurants as I can because 'cause I'm so good at it. I remember the, franchise salesperson calling me, or I think we were driving around to do site selection, and he said, "How many locations do you wanna have?" And I just said, "More." And, like, that was the feeling. And then, I opened up my second store, and it opened up at half the national average.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're in a bad situation again. 6 months later, I open up my third location. It opens up at a third of the national average. And so it's like, oh, and so like, it's like, turns out you're not God's gift to the earth. You're not the greatest operator ever, and you're gonna have to work your way out of this. And, we did. And then we opened up the fourth location and so on. And like, you know, life seems to be this never ending battle of, you think you're the greatest, you get taken down a peg. And then you fight back and your self-esteem goes back up, and then you get taken down a peg. I think that's why when you get older, you just get a little bit more humble.
I love that. Absolutely. And a lot of truth in there. It's absolutely intense. And at this point, you have how many locations?
Five.
Okay. And did you have the idea of ClearCOGS at the fifth, or did you already kind of started thinking about it while you were building out the third one? Or
When you're running restaurants, oftentimes you live within the four walls of your restaurant. And that certainly was true for me. I didn't really have social media. Actually, I had no social media, no Facebook, no Instagram, right? Like my whole
yeah,
world was just the restaurant or restaurants. So no, none of this happened when I was there because, I was too busy putting out fires. I ultimately ended up selling the restaurants and going back to grad school. And I remember, walking in and kind of realizing, I actually built a multi-million-dollar business with hundreds of employees. And, we kind of ran that whole thing on Excel spreadsheets and guessing. And it was just kind of one of
that's
those
crazy.
like, yeah, it wasn't an epiphany. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I should start ClearCOGS. It was just this like feeling. And so later on in life, I got into the whole programming data science world and saw
Mm.
what technology could do and was kind of like, okay, this is an answer for something.
Oh,
Yeah, it still wasn't even ClearCOGS, right? And, it was then I called my now co-founder and said, like, "I think there's something here." That's how ClearCOGS started. "I think there might be something here." And we went and talked to maybe 50 restaurant brands and just kept asking, "Why do you need this? Why do you need that? What would you like? Why do you want that?" And ultimately, every one of them would come back to the same thing at the end of the day. I don't know who's gonna walk in my restaurant tomorrow. Because I don't, I make inefficient decisions around what to order, what to prep, and who to staff. And we said, that is something we can do. And that's when we got started.
amazing. So, are you saying like you're recommending to founders before even writing your first line of code, they should literally talk to the potential ICP and see if there's like a pattern problem out there?
Yes, my 100%. Not only that, you should be your harshest critic. You should be going out and trying to figure out all of the reasons not to start this business. Really, really grind on them and get it down to just the few that you can't answer. For us, can we even do it? I mean, that was one of the questions. If we can do it, can we even get the data we need to do it? And so, like, we went and said, before we even raised money and started it, let's go see if we can get the data. We got the data. Let's go see if we can make something work. Called up my cousin who's got some restaurants. We made it work. We're like, okay, we've answered the biggest reasons we wouldn't be able to do it. Like, we're kind of out of excuses. Let's go do it.
I love that. Out of excuses, it's the end of the line here. You just have to stand up and just walk. I love it. And can you share like how did you guys meet? Like you and your co-founder. What was the spark that made you think that okay, this is the person I want to build my baby with, which is almost like a marriage type of relationship when you go in so deep. Like,
If you hadn't noticed, I tend to be a little bit allergic to these epiphany moments. Not if anything just strikes you like this is the right thing to do. I had that moment last night. I'm like, I need to
uh
write a book. That
really?
is just perfect. I sent myself an email about it, but like that was probably not the right decision, right? Whenever you get hit with an epiphany, it oftentimes is misleading. That's all to say, I met my co-founder on AngelList when he
Oh,
launched his first startup, and I think he was interviewing for a job or something, and, like, I got on the phone or, he was hiring for a job, and I got on the phone with him, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, like, no, no, this is not the right position or fit." But I hit it off with him, and I said, "Hey, I am more than happy to do some free advisory work for you." And so we met every week for, like, 45 minutes. It was the middle of COVID. My wife's in healthcare, so I'm at
Okay,
home with my
yeah.
1 and 3-year-old, so I'm just looking for a little intellectual stimulation. And so, like, we just start meeting and, we hit it off. We worked really, really well together. And so, I think we worked on a couple other projects between then and ClearCOGS, but he was my first call. And, I could not have been blessed with a better co-founder than Osa.
I love it. And are you one of these co-founders that, limitlessly scream at each other out of trust and love, trying to build something? Do you have like huge arguments, but you know that you guys like, you're super respectful? Because, there are these types of co-founders that like literally scream their lungs out, but they know they do it out of love.
Yes, that would summarize our relationship. We've learned not to do it publicly because it scares the hell out of anybody that's on a call with us. But, I think you have to have clear communication. I cannot tell you how often we have the conversation where I say or he says, I feel like fill in the blank, where I'm expressing my emotions, where I'm frustrated. You need to have that because if it bottles up, man, there's too much stress going on
Yeah,
to let it boil over.
absolutely. Absolutely. And is there, and this, you don't need to answer it, but is there any like craziest argument that you got into where you felt like, okay, this might not be like, a partnership that I want to be part of? Like, did it ever happen or it never went that far?
No, I mean, I think you had it right at the beginning. It all comes from a place of love.
Right.
We're
Exactly.
invested, our whole souls into this thing. So it's never perceived that one of us is trying to set the other one up or,
Hmm.
is trying to backstab or try and game.
Yeah.
It's always, he really cares. I really care. We really care about our points. How do we make this work? And sometimes one of us is not gonna be happy, and we're gonna go the opposite way, but, you gotta have a short memory and say like, "Look, we tried, we're gonna try something else."
Yeah. I love that you're sharing this. The fact is, it's not always rosy with co-founders, right? Like, there's a lot of founders that might be kind of stuck in maybe a toxic, co-founder relationship where maybe they feel like a power play or they feel like they need to be, paranoid to survive or something. Do you have any advice like to these people, to these founders running these types of, businesses?
So, we actually have a business coach that we use as basically quasi-founder therapy. I think if you have a co-founder, statistically, the greatest risk of failure for your company is a toxic relationship. So we invest heavily in us maintaining, a great relationship and good open communication because of the business, right? It's to the benefit of the business. My advice is go find somebody that can mediate, talk it out. As long as you both really believe in the company and want the company to succeed, you'll find a way to make the relationship work. And maybe you guys have completely different visions of the company, you know, even that kind of thing, you can go test, try and find a way to test which one's right. And if you're ultimately in a relationship where you really don't want to be together, find a way to get out of it, as soon as possible.
I love it. And thanks for sharing that, definitely dropping gold. Um, do you feel like you wanted to first bootstrap and then you wanted to raise, or did you always start, with the initial mindset of already raising down the road? How did that like evolve?
So this actually is one of the biggest friction points that
Uh-huh.
that we often have. And this is like where do we want to go as a company? And put a better way, how much risk do we want to take on as a company? Because if you want to build a multi-billion-dollar company, a lot of times that means putting it all on the line and going for broke, not just once, not just twice. You're doubling down multiple times. And
Yeah,
so I think early on, you're getting friends and family, seed capital. That's not really as much of a conversation. But I think we had the realization somewhere along the lines that really this is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity.
it is.
And you don't get those opportunities very often. Most founders don't find them multiple times. Most individuals don't get the opportunity in their life to pursue a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And we've both signed up for the fact that we're going to go give it our best bet. And that means raising outside capital. It means we probably won't have the most equity at the end of it. We probably risk adjusted would do just as well financially to bootstrap it and be a smaller company. But, this is our opportunity to really make a dent in the world and change the status quo. And it's a privilege and an honor, and we're going after it aggressively.
I love that mindset. I think a lot of founders need to stick with that mindset. Like this is really important to survive because you see, like if your TAM is like too small and your tickets are too low, you're probably gonna end up drowning, right? Like this is something that you really have to look at if you don't want to crash your boat,
Well,
you know?
but I think it really comes down to deciding what it is that you want to build and at what scale. So your TAM, you can change based on who it is you're going after and how broad the feature set is, right? If you want to have a smaller business with healthy unit economics that's going to be a lifestyle business, you just need to accept that early on. And, look, I come from restaurants. Like, I kind of started off as a small business owner. I tend to think that way. So once I accepted, right, that this was the trajectory we're taking, it gives me great comfort in a lot of the decisions we make and why we make them.
And Matt, we're actually you said something really important. You adjusted your mindset,
Yeah.
right? So what was the biggest change or the biggest changes that you had to do that you feel that actually brought you to where you are right now?
Okay. So two things. One of them is investor facing. So you come to the realization that you're going to build this big thing. And there's a lot of fear there. If you are a rational individual who's thinking about all the ways that this cannot work, because that's really our job is to think about all the things that are wrong and how we're going to address them. You have to kind of adjust your mindset to say, I'm going to overcome every one of these, right? And when we do, it can be this massive success so that when you go in front of an investor, you can portray with confidence, that vision, right? Knowing all of the different ways that you can fail at the same time.
That's important. It's so important what you just said. You know, just holding those strong beliefs that you can do it even though the danger is always there. You still have to, advance through the rain, through the mud, through everything, right? Like that's the founder mentality.
And then the second one is on the customer side. If you're going to build this massive thing, it means you can't be everything to everyone. And early on, you love and care about your customers
Yeah.
so much. And you've put your heart and soul into it. And you want to fill every one of their needs and their changes. And, something that I struggle with, can't we do this thing for this customer? And, on the product side, that would greatly deviate from the roadmap. And it would not allow us to scale to where we need to be. And like you have to make these little sacrifices that hurt along the way.
And what were your biggest sacrifices that you feel like who really impacted your life so far?
I mean, time, energy, being with the family more. This is a 24 hours a day, 7 day a week, 365-day a year job where you wake up in the morning thinking about it, you go to sleep thinking about it, and you don't make room for headspace for your friends. And, you miss the barbecue in the neighborhood and all of that. And I it sounds bad, and it probably is for some people. Like, I was always kind of a hyper focuser and wired this way. Like, I love it. I thrive on it. I wanna just grind on a problem and get it fixed. And so, I guess it's not as big of a sacrifice for me, but if you ask my wife, I think that's what she'd say.
Well, talking about that, like a lot of founders have this issue where they can't find, time to balance between business and relationships. Like, what type of best advice would you give there? I know that balance doesn't necessarily exist like in the world of startups, but what would be like the closest advice that would actually work or worked in your life?
Well, look, I think, trying to find the best way to put this.
Yeah.
So I've got a wife, been married almost 15 years. We have
Wow.
2 wonderful daughters that are 6 and 9, right in the thick of childhood. I gotta pick them up from the bus stop. I gotta
Oh,
drop them off at
that's cute.
gymnastics. Like, I'm not, a college kid that has 18 hours a day where me and my co-founder can be locked in a loft and just working constantly.
Oh, the dream.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I sit there envious. My kids were out of town last week, and I, like, just had a week of being an adult with no kids, and all I could think was, "People live like this."
Yeah.
Like, it's totally different. Um, my advice would be this: 1, you can do it. You just have to prioritize, and it does force some discipline on you. But 2, I also have outside hobbies. I do woodworking.
Nice.
I tap my own maple trees and make maple syrup. I love
Oh,
cooking.
wow.
I have all these different things that I like to do, and I find that separating myself from the business, ever so slightly, and going out and doing an activity, I do my best thinking. When I'm working on a desk and, sanding, that's a lot of time for thought. It's quasi meditation. Not only does it help me come up with better ideas, which as a founder, you are in that business, but it also gives you perspective and a well-rounded, skill set where, like, ultimately you're selling, you're talking to customers, building relationships. People like talking to somebody that isn't just, a one-trick pony.
Exactly. I love that. No, you're dropping so much gold in this episode. It's intense. It's super useful, everything that you're saying so far.
Well, I'm
And
sure I'll get taken back a step in, like, 6 months, and everything will go to hell, and I'll go back to being very insecure. Right now, we're on that
no,
good side where the ego's up.
we'll see. Because, this tech is literally riding a wave. And I think you're literally going to explode like in a good way in the coming year and 2 years, no. And I'm very, very curious to understand, like, when you started raising, what was your mindset for how many meetings that you should go through to finally, before even giving up? Did you give yourself like a number, or did you have this mindset where you're gonna go with unlimited meetings till you raise? Like, how did you fight that war?
Oh, I didn't. I didn't have a set number of meetings. I know people do that. My advice is this: learn to love the journey. Learn to love having the conversations. Learn how to get something out of every meeting you have with a venture capitalist. Treat it as a game for how do I optimize, my time in this meeting to be as productive and, close the deal. If you treat it as a game and enjoy the journey, it is so much more. There's no end. You don't ever stop raising capital. You don't ever stop having problems as a company. Like, learn to enjoy it or get out because it's going to be miserable if you don't.
Oh, well said, well said. And do you remember how many no's did you go through to finally close that round?
Hundreds.
Hundreds, like 200 or 300? Like how many hundreds?
I don't have an exact number for you. I know that I
Approximately.
have a log of everybody I've met with over the last 4 years, and there's something like 700 venture capitalists.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So you've met, okay, so so far, I just really want to be transparent with you. In the 30 plus episodes we've done, the average high end number was like 250. So 250 meetings to finally close like either a Series B or a Series A, whatever. So you went through 700 until you finally closed this oversubscribed seed round, right?
Let's go through the math, though. So if I have
Yeah.
700, my guess is my co-founder probably took 150, 200 of them. So you're down to like
Okay.
500. Of the
Okay.
names I have in there, it's probably a ratio of 2 VCs to every 1 company. So I bet we're probably closer to 250 that I took.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. So you're definitely in the top tier of the, rejections that it takes to finally get that check.
But they're not
That's
rejections.
they're not
I mean, like,
rejections.
yeah, not even close. Look, these are conversations.
Huh.
You're effectively asking someone to marry you. Like,
I love it.
you're gonna I mean, I think that the amount of time between a seed investment and an exit is probably greater than the average length of a marriage. I would love to know
No.
those statistics.
Oh God. That is a great question for ChatGPT, by the
I
way.
was
I
thinking the
love it.
same thing, like, I gotta Google that, but, or
Probably they're already doing it while watching it, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, either way, like, so you're getting into a marriage.
Yeah.
Nobody gets married on the first date. You
No
know,
one.
you're having a conversation with somebody that you're probably going to have another conversation with in real earnest 2 years from now about investing.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't go into it with that mentality of like, I need to get you to invest tomorrow, just changes the whole dynamic. I view it as we've got 700 contacts and I've probably got 2 or 300 great relationships with incredibly smart people that can offer something to this company. You know, that's an invaluable resource. Why wouldn't I care for that?
I love what you're saying. Absolutely. It's this angle where you're looking at a 6 and from the other side it looks like a 9. So, like some founders can see it as rejection, but like you just said, you need to Shaolin, the whole thing into positive energy. That's how your mindset needs to be to get to where you are. And this is actually the proof of the way that you're thinking. It's so different from everyone else.
Yeah, and I'd also throw in there, get to know as quickly as possible. You know, venture capitalists don't want to give you a no. They want to keep you on the hook as long as they possibly can until they're forced into a decision, right? Like, so they're trying to maintain the relationship. If you come in and are super transparent and say, guys, I don't know if you come in this round, doesn't matter. Let me know either way, right? No harm, no foul. We can revisit this at any time, and you give them that out. Like, I don't want to have 5 meetings with you, and I don't want to go through due diligence with you if you're not ultimately going to invest. So, like, set that up front.
Can you share with our audience what was the two top advices that you've received from VCs so far?
Man, I don't have a great answer. So, a couple things. One, I don't necessarily look for this monolithic advice, right? It's what does this investor with this skill set and this understanding have that could be of value to me? What can I learn from them? So the advice I get is very different based on the individual that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
would
anything to
say,
share, like of what you've learned, like so far from your conversations with them. Yeah,
yeah, I would say the two things I've learned. One, first couple calls, nobody wants your life story. Nobody wants this, like, you're way too in the weeds with your company. They don't want to know. They
yeah.
have like 10 questions that they need answered. Check off a list. Make it as easy as possible for them. Just answer those questions. Don't get into all the details. Let them ask you when they want details. Second thing you learn is they're people, right? How many founders out there are sitting around today saying, man, I just did something great. sign this new customer, launch this new feature. Why aren't all the venture capitalists calling me? Think about the other side of that. The venture capitalists probably just closed a huge deal, raised a new round. Did you reach out to them to say congratulations? You know, that is an actual two-way relationship. And if you want to have great investors, you need to learn to have a real relationship, a two-way relationship.
You just dropped a gold bomb right there. So this is a great way of building a relationship. Like just reach out. Just reach out to your favorite investor.
Yeah, just say congrats. Don't go pitch them your thing.
Exactly. And so many founders do that stupid mistake.
Could you imagine if you walked up to a girl at a bar and said, "Hey, I'm Matt Wampler. Like, here's how much money I have. This is the
There
car
you
I
go.
drive. This is my job. Like, don't you want to date me?" No. You
Yeah.
go demonstrate that you're somebody they would want to be with. You're funny, you're charming, you're somebody you'd want to spend time at the, airport on a layover. There is a real human aspect to it, especially at the early stages. Eventually, you get to like, IPO where, you're bringing in a professional CFO that is literally getting you ready for IPO and it's
Yeah.
just about the numbers and metrics. But man, pre-seed, seed, even A, it's about the person. You're betting on the horse, right on the jockey, not the horse. Yeah, betting on the jockey.
Right, right. Both. You're betting on either the horse or the jockey. Depends on who's like on the display, right? But yeah, I agreed. I agreed. Wow. And do you, want to crystallize the top three mistakes and advice that you got like so far from running your startup that you've learned that you want to like share with the founder community?
Not asking for help. Ask for help, right? Be honest with the venture capitalists. Be honest with your customers. Ask for help. Secondly, for the customer side of things, don't overpromise. Be honest. This is our vision. This is what we're building. We think the world would be a better place, and I will wake up every morning and put in blood, sweat, and tears to make your business better. But I cannot promise it's going to be perfect out of the box because it never is.
Oh, and it's so true. You got a third one?
Look, I think that and maybe this is just the ethos today. Everyone says we're the greatest thing ever. There's no problems with our company. We're not struggling with anything. I don't think investors believe that. So, being candid, here's how we view the world. Here's how we view the problems. Here's how we're going about it. Like, be real. Like, eh, you're getting married, right? Most people don't just throw a check on, you know, this guy seems really confident. They want people that are open-minded, willing to change. They want to know how you think.
Do you like did you actually go through an extremely brutal situation in the startup's journey so far that you'd like to kind of record in this one and look back and say like, oh my god, I actually did that?
Man, there was a moment. I was driving back from like North Carolina. I had my dog with me. The dog had thrown up in the car.
Oh
I
my god.
had I had my round was like falling apart at one point. We didn't have the money to make it. I hadn't paid myself in like 9 months. And like I remember having to get out and like revise a financial model with my sick dog on the side of the road.
Oh,
It
are
was
you
just like,
serious? Oh.
this is not how businesses get built. And, I come to learn that
Yeah.
that kind of is, there's a lot of, like they say, the duck just gliding on the water and paddling vigorously with its feet under. Like that's kind of how it is.
I love that. Oh, wow. This is one of these hidden truths that no one wants to kind of reveal, right? Like we have to suffer to get to where we are.
You know, the one thing that I've really appreciated about, the startup world is this. Founders remember that and they want to help. I remember just reaching out on LinkedIn to some people that shouldn't talk with me and asking for advice. And, they got on and, they looked at me as an equal. and,
Yeah.
empathized and
Mm.
wanted to help. And there's this, pay it forward, from the help
Yes.
that they got. And I certainly try and do it myself. It's part of the culture that I hope continues.
Totally agreed. And do you feel like we forgot to discuss something important? Maybe I didn't ask something that you feel like we should have discussed.
No, man, it's been great.
Awesome. Well, I'm really, really happy to see you succeed, to see you grow, to see you expand. This is amazing to capture this moment right now because, you're still in the seed phase. And I think in 2 to 3 years, you're already probably going to be in like Series B, probably raising like 50 million. That's the future.
Who knows? I certainly head in that direction and privileged to be on the journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have one last question for you. So,
Yeah, hit me.
if you could whisper one thing to yourself at day one of building your business, like what would you say to yourself?
Ask for more help,
Really?
build relationships, lean heavily into social media and, storytelling and building a community because, like, I know we all like this idea of Mark Zuckerberg sitting in his dorm room coming up with an idea and it just taking off, but, an outlier.
It
Most
is.
great companies get built brick by brick, decision by decision with the help of everyone around them.
Amen to that, brother. This is definitely exactly the mantra that founders need to keep. It's not easy. You just take the risk, hurt yourself.
I'm gonna be tuning in, Mark, for some of your episodes where it is easy for somebody just to, feel good. And I throw this one out there. I talk with a lot of founders. People don't get to celebrate their wins very often, right? Like you almost feel like you're showing off. Like, man, I love being around founders when good things are happening to them. It's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, celebrate the wins with the people around you. It's not a zero-sum game. Like, yeah.
Man, golden words right there. I love that, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Phenoms. Really a great episode.
Mark, you're the man. And for anybody who made it for the full hour, check me out on the Restaurant AI podcast. We've got some more of these conversations.
Absolutely. And if investors or clients want to reach out, Matt, what's the best way?
So look, if you're a restaurant, you're on Toast. Get on the Toast Marketplace and click Enable ClearCOGS. We got a free freemium version on there. If not, go to the website. We have a ROI calculator built in there. We've got a place to schedule a meeting. We love talking with restaurant operators. It brings great joy to me. And then if you're an investor, like, look, we are always looking for great investors. We're not raising at the moment, but like as I said, if you want to get into a relationship and maybe do a little dating so that we can get married in a few years, like, love to have the conversation.
I love it. Love it. Thanks, Matt. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this Phenoms episode. If you like this one, feel free to hit that like button and, of course, subscribe, comment. All right, see you in the next one. Cheers.